Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Moss Show, where we talk about, of course, the decentralized revolution, trying to explain to you the way the world is changing, which, of course, you already know. You see it all around you, but we're trying to bring sense, trying to bring context to that by looking at it through the lens of politics, finance, and technology. And, I like to bring to you, some educational pieces, some interesting guests, and, of course, the latest breaking news so you can understand what is going on. Now, you can read the news for yourself. I know you got that. But I can curate it for you. I can bring it to you. But more importantly, I can bring the context to you if you want to know how to navigate this changing world. Now, we look at it from a lot of areas, like I said, politics, finance, and technology. And from the financial side, we're seeing the end of a 100-year sovereign debt crisis, something that none of us living have ever been through today. And it's definitely interesting, to say the least, watching how this changes. We're seeing, debt, the end of this debt cycle. We saw that we're basically in a giant Ponzi scheme. If we don't continue to expand the debt, then everything falls apart. Right? That's what happens with Ponzi schemes. If they don't keep getting bigger, then they deflate and the whole thing falls apart. And that's basically what our entire financial system is. It's a giant Ponzi scheme. You can't taper a Ponzi. The problem is that as you continue to fill that Ponzi, as you continue to inflate it, you get, inflation. Right? Not only does the money supply inflate, the prices of everything inflates. And I saw, it became a very, very hot topic for the Biden administration running on his last presidential campaign, because everybody was feeling the pain of inflation. But that's what happens. There's just no way out of it. I've been on record. I'm saying it over and over, and I'm going to say it again right now. I believe that we're seeing some of the lowest inflation we'll see for the decade. Now, a lot of people say it's peaked, but it hasn't. We did see, I think it was last September, the inflation as measured by the CPI Consumer Price Index was as high as, I believe, 9.1, which was amazing. That means that you're losing about 10% of your purchasing power per year. So if you had $100,000 in the bank at the end of the year, you still have $100,000, but it only buys you $90,000 worth of goods. Of course, that's a fake number. It's not real. But as that CPI number has come down, I'm going to get back to that in a second. As that number's come down, we just saw the latest CPI print come out this week, and it was in the 5% range, 5.1, I believe. And in maybe, it's hard to say this. As I say, maybe one of the most tone-deaf responses from the Biden administration, the White House, came this week in an advertisement that had President Joe Biden grinning, wearing aviator sunglasses, next to an announcement of, quote, good news. Inflation has fallen 45% from its peak. President Biden, he's running ads, taking credit for bringing inflation down 45%. But what does that even mean? So look, here's what it means. As inflation goes up by 10%, or call it 5% a year, it goes up by 5% a year. That means every year, prices are going up 5%, which is false. I'm going to read you some charts here in a second. It's more like 15 to 20%. But let's just say it's going up by 5% a year. Well, when inflation went as high as 9% and now it's down to 5%, that means that prices are still going up. That means your cost of living is still going up. Your quality of life is going down. That means you're having to work more hours of your life to have the same quality of life that you did before. It's still going up, just at a slower rate. So while he's grinning, running ads, promoting the good news that it's fallen from its summer peak, well, prices are still going up. My quality of life is still going down. It's just going down a little bit less slowly. Is that something to be proud about? Headline inflation declined to a 5% year over year. I'm still losing 5%. Which, by the way, their target is 2%. So it's still more than double what the economic policy is. Still more than double. I would not call that a success. But I love the spin. It's the glass half full, glass half empty, so to speak. But it's sort of like this let them eat cake kind of a thing, I think. But like I said, they had no mention. Where were the fact checkers? Where were the fact checkers in this? No mention that it's much higher than it's supposed to be. Never mind that it's several times higher in comparison to where it was just 2 years ago. Never mind that core inflation, which takes out some of the more volatile categories, increased at 5.6%. Never mind any of that. Now, to get into some of these numbers here, we can see, oh boy, overall prices are almost 15% higher than they were 2 years ago. The cost of essentials like groceries have gone up much faster. Now, the problem with this overall number is inflation hits all of us differently. If you live in your parents' basement and eat Cheetos and watch Netflix, like your costs haven't gone up at all. If you're trying to buy a home in a high value area or send your kids to college or paying big medical bills, it probably hit you a lot more. Now, one of the big problems is prices go up, wages have not kept up. As a matter of fact, utilities and gas have increased by 20% or more. Utilities and gas. Now, in California, in Southern California specifically, utilities and gas specifically, has gone up by almost 400% in the last year. 383%. Wages certainly haven't kept up with that. Since April of 2021, the cost of preparing food at home has risen by almost 20%. So you want to just save money, don't go out to eat? Well, preparing food at home has gone up by 20%. Now, that also depends on what you eat. If you eat ribeyes and drink milk, your costs have gone up way more than if you're eating stuff out of a box. The cost of gas is up 22% compared to 2 years ago. That means you used to be able to fill up your gas tank. Now you can fill it up 3/4 of the way. Travel, from April 21, prices are up 36%. Hotel prices are up 31%. So you get to take less trips, get to go less places. Utilities have surged since 2021, as I said. Electricity and pipe gas are up 21%, 26%. But again, in SoCal, my gas prices are up 383%. Now, the media wants to run cover for the Fed on this, of course, running ads with Joe Biden with his aviator glasses, telling you that there's no inflation. The same people that told you there was no inflation, the same people that told you inflation was transitory, now they're trying to tell us that inflation is good for us. They said, it only hurts the rich. It's the consumer's fault. It's greedy businesses' fault. They're raising prices. It's Putin's fault. Right? It's everyone else's fault. But a recent headline pondered, quote, "Inflation is falling. Why aren't people noticing?" Like, really? It's because we live in the real world, and I got to put gas in my tank, and I got to go buy food at the store. So whatever you want to tell us the number is, whatever you want to tell us inflation is, it doesn't really matter. We know what it is because I got to put money out of my pocket, and I know that my paycheck is not covering my cost of goods anymore. And I have to tell you, business moguls warn the crunch is far from over. As a matter of fact, Warren Buffett says that we are not over bank failures. And Jeremy Grantham says the best we can hope for, is the stock market shedding 1/4 of its current value. That's a 25% drop. He says that's the best we can hope for. Other things will break, he says, and who knows what they'll be. Well, we do know that it's breaking people's budgets. We're running through some of the biggest news headlines this week so you understand what is going on, the play-by-play here of how the world's changing through the lens of course, politics, finance, and technology. And, of course, those three come together when we talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. That is the perfect intersection, which, of course, is why I've chosen that. It is the Venn diagram. It is politics. It is finance. And it is technology. It's the merger of those three things. And we are seeing the transitionary process. In chemistry, you have to mix chemicals together. They have a reaction. And as they change state, it's a very messy process. That's where we're at. The old system is trying to fight and remain relevant while the new system is wiping out. It's called creative destruction. A new thing is created and it destroys the old way. But the old way doesn't want to give up. And we're seeing the old system fighting back with everything it's got. Of course, we're talking about the existing monetary system. It hasn't changed in 100 years, which is why it's all being reset. The old system is old and it's broken and it doesn't work. And it will never work because you can't create money from thin air. It doesn't work. I mean, it works until it doesn't. But all these problems, all these distortions are because of that. And as we have new inventions, new types of technologies like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, the old system wants to fight against that. We've been talking about this a lot with the SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, and this Operation Choke Point, trying to do everything they can to shut them down. He's been going after all these different cryptocurrency exchanges, shutting them down. The latest one this week was Bittrex, which is one of the longest running exchanges in the United States, which I don't recommend them. They stole money out of my account. I would never use them anyway, so I'm good riddance to them in my opinion. But they shut down their U.S. operations moving offshore because of the U.S. regulations, and they're still getting sued, even though they're getting out of the country. Coinbase, which is maybe the oldest and longest-lasting exchange in the United States, is now saying that they might consider moving out of the U.S. and going to the U.K. because the regulations in the market in the U.S. are so bad. As a matter of fact, I did many videos about this. I made some very bold claims that a lot of people didn't like, and I said that I believe that cryptocurrency as a category, in the old days you can close your eyes and throw a dart and just make money buying crypto, I think that's over because of the regulatory hammer that was going to come down. And I said I think it would be good for Bitcoin, though. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Gary Gensler from the SEC has been throwing around lawsuits left and right like crazy, and he's come under a lot of fire, and rightfully so. I believe the SEC should shut down. He should resign in disgrace. And now we have lawmakers in the United States actually calling for his resignation. Now, this week he came under fire, having to testify in front of Congress. I want to play a couple of clips here for you because it's pretty important what they're saying here. So let's play a couple of clips so you can hear exactly what they're talking about Gensler and what the problems are with his ambiguity when it comes to regulations. Let's go ahead and play this clip here.
Is Ether a commodity or security?
And again, it depends on the facts and the law, and if there's a group of individuals...
I'm asking you about the facts and the law sitting in your seat and the judgment you are making.
And so, Mr. Chair, I think you would not want me to prejudge because I'm also...
But you have prejudged on this. You've taken 50 enforcement actions. We're finding out as we go, as you file suit, as people get Wells notices on what is a security in your view, in your agency's view. I'm asking you a very simple question about the second largest digital asset. What is your view?
And my view is if there's a group of individuals in the middle that the public is
anticipating... All right, so let me just ask a second question then. Do you think it serves the market for an object to be viewed by the commodities regulator as a commodity?
So I'm going to pause that for a second. So this is Patrick McHenry, the head of the Financial Services Committee, interviewing Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC. And so he said, is Ethereum a security? Simple yes or no question. Is it a security? And Gary Gensler, the head of the SEC, and he's like, wait a minute, you're the head of the SEC. Is it? Well, it's not that easy. Well, and then he said, so is the regulatory market or environment clear? Well, so like obviously it's not. Like if he can't say yes or no to that, it's obviously not clear. I mean, obviously, right? It's either black or white or it's not. The laws are supposed to be black or white. Laws are meant to be black and white, and everybody's meant to be able to know what those laws are so that we can plan our lives according to what those laws are. Like the game of basketball. Everybody knows what the rules of basketball are, the laws of basketball, and they're applied to everybody equally. We can all read the rule book, and I can plan my game. As a coach, I could plan my game plan based off of those laws that are written in stone for everybody to read. The law is supposed to be that way, but here Gary Gensler is being accused by Patrick McHenry of having unclear laws. And when he asks him a very clear yes or no question, is Ethereum a security? He can't even answer that. Now, he's trying to give this runaround question. Well, if it's controlled by different people, let's hear that.
Be viewed by the commodities regulator as a commodity and the securities regulator to be viewed as a security. Do you think that provides safety and soundness for the product? Do you think it provides consumer protection? Do you think it serves the value of innovation? I think no should be a very simple answer for you here.
I think
that uncertainty is bad, is it not?
And I think that Congress has said that there's one agency, the Securities and Exchange Commission, under this committee.
And you won't answer my question, and you're the head of that agency. So give me a break. Come on.
I'm answering it in the generic because you would not want me to speak about any one set of facts and circumstance.
Okay, so, but you've already spoken. Have you said anything about Bitcoin?
So he is the head. He's supposed to be saying what it is. And the laws are so ambiguous, and they want them this way so they can arbitrarily assign them as they see fit. That's the whole point. Now, this is a big, big problem for reasons that are bigger than you might understand. Let's just hear the rest of this clip real quick.
My predecessors and the agency itself has spoken to them.
Okay, but you're not willing to do the same about Ether. Okay, so let me just step back. There's a lack of clarity here in the marketplace. Can you at least agree to that?
I think that the clarity is there. The law is clear.
All right.
There's a group
so
of individuals
let me be explicit
on.
about this. The market doesn't see it. Your regulatory actions and the CFTC's regulatory actions say that there's a great deal of uncertainty here. It is the intention of this committee to fix that uncertainty and actually provide a sound legal basis for this.
So he said, so the market doesn't see it as clarity. Do you think it's clear? And he says, I think it is clear. Okay, great. Well, if it's clear, then tell me, is Ethereum a security or not? If it's clear. But he can't. This gets worse. It's very apparent that inside the United States government, the land of the free, no less, the land of innovation, the land that draws people from all over the world to come here and innovate, has two opposing factions within the government. One that is clearly 100% anti-innovation and technology, and another that continues to hold the U.S. ethos of having innovation and freedom. The U.S. is the land of the free, and freedom brings creativity, and creativity brings prosperity, which is why the United States has been one of the most prosperous, not one of, the most prosperous nation in the history of the world, which is why the United States continues to lead the world, which is why the United States still continues to draw the best and brightest people in the world, and which is why the United States will constantly outmaneuver and outproduce and out-innovate authoritarian regimes like China and North Korea, etc. But we clearly have a group, a faction inside the United States government who are hell-bent on stopping that. Now, we know who some of these people are. Obviously, Gary Gensler is one of those. I'm going to play a couple more clips for you in a second. We know Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has been on a warpath on Bitcoin. She says that Bitcoin threatens to destabilize the financial system. Okay, Bitcoin is a piece of code. It's a decentralized protocol. If a decentralized protocol, if a piece of code could destabilize the entire financial system, I think the financial system is ready to fall over, dead. We know Elizabeth Warren on a warpath. She's literally running on a campaign of anti-crypto. I've never heard of a lawmaker running on a campaign to actually take away people's freedoms before. Pretty interesting. So you can hear people like Patrick McHenry grilling Gary Gensler saying, what are you doing? You're completely ruining this. We have Coinbase, companies in the United States, as I said, Bittrex, companies in the United States leaving the United States. Now, where are they going? Well, where they're going isn't necessarily as important, so we know that the U.S. is losing, but where are they going? Why are they going there? Why does the U.S. want to lose its innovation? Now, if you look back at all of the growth in the United States in the last 20 years, that's really set us apart from the whole rest of the world, has been that we have had internet technology. We've had Facebook and Apple and Netflix and Google and Uber, all here in the United States. What if the U.S. would have taken this policy with internet companies 30 years ago? Where would the U.S. be? And that's exactly what they're trying to do. Oh, and it gets better. I want to play you a couple of these clips right here. This is Rep. Emmer. He is great. He grilled SEC Chair Gary Gensler. Let's play a couple of these clips.
Chair Gensler, I have a lot of questions in a limited amount of time, so if you could keep your answers to either a yes or a no, that will allow us to get through.
I love this, how Mr. Emmer says, would you just keep the answers to a yes or no because I have a very limited amount of time? Of course, he's not going to be able to do that, but let's listen in.
Many as possible, sir. From your perspective, is it more difficult now for the digital asset industry to access financial products and services in the United States than it was, say, 2 years ago?
Sir, I'm not running one of those businesses. If they came into compliance, I think
Reclaiming my time. The answer, sir, is yes.
So, Operation Checkpoint. We've been talking about this for weeks. The SEC and the FDIC and the Fed have been moving against banks specifically with crypto ties and shutting them down. Operation Chokepoint 2.0. They are making it where these crypto companies cannot get bank accounts. He asked them a very question. Is it harder for these companies to get bank accounts now than it was a few years ago? Yes or no? It's a very simple question, yes or no. Gary Gensler should know he's the head of the SEC that is moving against these companies, shutting them down, but of course he won't give you a straight answer. And Mr. Emmer says, look, I'll answer it. Yeah, it's yes. All right, let's keep going.
Do you think you and the SEC have had a role to play in that?
I think we have a role to protect the American investor and the capital markets. And
Reclaiming my time, sir. You have played an obvious role in that. Does it concern you, by the way, that your approach to the digital asset industry is actually driving this industry out of the United States?
We're trying to drive it to compliance, and if they're not complying with...
Now, I want to just let you know that there was long pauses between those answers. Again, chewing up his time and him trying to think of the most politically way to answer it. I've cut that out in the sake of time here. So he says, does it concern you that you're driving this technology and innovation offshore? We're losing it in the United States. And that's his answer.
With the laws, then they shouldn't be offering their products.
Reclaiming my time. Madam Chair, I would like to enter into the record this Wall Street Journal article from April 14th, 2023, detailing China's ploy to open its banking system to crypto firms in an effort to seize an opportunity created by our hostile regulatory environment, which, Mr. Chair, you're a big part of.
So by openly being hostile, by shutting down their banking, by giving them no clear guidance, no regulatory framework. Gary Gensler is telling these companies you need to come in and register, but gives them no path to do so. And then arbitrarily imposing rules and regulations anytime they want. They're driving them offshore, just like we announced, just like I talked about, two different companies trying to leave the United States right now. And per Mr. Emmer's reference to this Wall Street Journal, China is openly accepting these. The Communist Chinese Party is the main beneficiary of this. Just like the U.S. shutting down all our energy, shutting down our oil fields, like BlackRock taking over Exxon and forcing them to divest from their oil fields. And who took those over? Oh, China did. Just like in Germany, they're shutting down all the natural gas and energy, went into war with Russia. Now German companies can't afford to have energy, and they're shutting down. And where are they moving? Oh, they're moving to China. So the U.S. and Europe are doing the best job they can at destroying the countries from within. And who are the main beneficiaries? Oh, that's China. Let's keep going.
Your regulatory style lacks flexibility and nuance, and as a result, you've been an incompetent cop on the beat, doing nothing to protect everyday Americans and pushing American firms into the hands of the CCP. Your intention to work against SEC mission and put American investors in harm's way has been made very apparent, sir.
Some harsh words, but true. Harsh but true. Now these, as I said, there's very clearly two different factions within the government. One that is clearly anti-technology, anti-innovation, anti-freedom. And there are still some good people who are trying to protect us, as Rep. Emmer goes on there, McHenry before him. Now, inside the SEC, there's also multiple people. Gary Gensler is the head of that. One of the members inside the SEC is Hester Pierce. Now, she came out and made some statements this week. She said, quote, "Rather than embracing the promise of new technology as we've done in the past, here we propose to embrace stagnation, force centralization, urge expatriation, and welcome extinction of new technology," end quote. Wow. She goes on to say, no longer does this commission consider the real-world effects of its exercise of authority. No longer does the commission worry that regulatory bullheadedness often produces absurd consequences. And then this part here. She says, today's commission treats its basic approach to exchange regulation as something that must not, indeed cannot, be altered to allow room for new technologies or for new ways of doing business. And then finally, she says, the release sends a message that we are uninterested in facilitating innovation and competition in the financial markets and instead seek to protect incumbents, end quote. So even within the SEC, we have these factions. Everybody can see what the heck is going on. We're the land of the free. You're taking away people's freedoms. You're arbitrarily creating rules. You think you're a king. You can't even clearly define them. When you're asked a point-blank question by the head of the Financial Service Committee, you can't even answer it. You say there's clarity, but there's not. You're telling companies to register, but you give them no path. You're openly pushing countries offshore into the hands of the enemies. That's what they're saying. And I agree with that. You know, when we look at technology, again, as I always say, it's technology that changes the world more than anything. And it's certainly changing the world right now. How we communicate, how we organize, and things like that. And of course, it's the technology that's going to change the world. And so on one hand, it's the technology that we're going to want, we the people will want, to continue to have this innovation. And innovation gives us a better life. It allows us to communicate easier and work harder or work less, etc. But it's the exact thing that the current leaders, the incumbents, don't want because they don't want to be disrupted. They don't want to lose their position, their incumbent position. You know, it's the reason why a company like Kodak, who even invented the digital camera, can't embrace the digital camera and end up going out of business. A century-old company, one of the largest companies in the United States at a certain time. And it's because no company can really work to disrupt themselves. You always just try to hang on. And who cares the damage and destruction that gets left behind? Who cares about the innovation that gets stifled? Who cares about the toes that get stepped on in its wake? And one of those is playing out in real time. I've been talking about this. It's really being played out in order for the governments to continue to command or control. They have to control the flow of information. There's a bill being put forth called the Restrict Act that made a whole bunch of noise, including I was talking about here, and now it seems to have gone a little bit quiet. But basically, the United States government, the land of the free, is trying to pass a bill that they can, again, arbitrarily, unilaterally decide any piece of technology that they deem to be illegal is just illegal. And if you use it, you just die. Not die, but literally almost die, like literally have all your property taken, 20 years in prison, $1 million fine. And this seems to be really getting drummed up to, or I should say, there's other events that have happened since then that seem to be being used, never letting a crisis go to waste, being used to even push that agenda further. I believe we talked about last week, talking about these Pentagon paper leaks. And there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack, and there's more unfolding. And that the problem that I see, like a lot of these very similar situations, is the leaked information is what we should be discussing, but all we do is focus on the leak itself. Like when the Hunter Biden laptop was found during Biden's presidential run, nobody wanted to talk about, when I say nobody, none of the mainstream legacy media. I hate to even call them mainstream anymore because they're certainly not mainstream anymore. CNN, CNBC, New York Times, they're legacy. They're not mainstream. And the reason why I say that is they don't have the masses anymore. CNN on their most popular show at prime time gets 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 people watching. The other night, Elon Musk had a Twitter space with 3.3 million people on at one time. CNN's never got those numbers. Joe Rogan gets 200 million listens a month. 200 million. So CNN, they're certainly not mainstream. So I need to change my own vocabulary. They're not mainstream, but they're legacy. But this legacy media, instead of talking about what was uncovered in the Hunter Biden laptop story and how all these ties show Joe Biden's brother and his son using Joe Biden's name to get all these political favors and giving 10% to the big guy and all those things, they don't want to talk about any of that. Instead, they just want to focus on how they got the laptop and how it's illegal. And the same thing's happened with these Pentagon Papers. Mainstream media, legacy media continues to want to cover for them, continue to talk about everything about the potential hacker and who leaked the information and who he was and how he did it and all these things, but not talking about any of the information that came out from that. Like, for example, how the U.S. government has spent hundreds of billions of dollars in this war, hundreds of billions of dollars, and how Ukraine is losing in a really, really big way. As a matter of fact, Ukraine has seemingly already lost. Of course, they don't want to admit that, because what else was found is that it's being used for massive amounts of grift and theft. $400 million potentially or more has gone into these Ukrainian leaders' pockets. $400 million of your tax dollars. And of course, they don't want the fighting to be over because they need to continue funneling money to themselves. Julian Assange, who is locked up for very similar, blowing the whistle on these illegal operations the U.S. government does, Julian Assange said about the Afghanistan war that really all it was a way to take taxpayer money and funnel it into their pockets. And that's exactly what we saw released through these papers. That's exactly what they're doing, taking hundreds of billions of dollars from the taxpayers in the United States and putting it into Ukraine and funneling it directly into their pockets. So we saw that. People don't want that. They want to keep it going for as long as they can. We saw, I saw this week, Tucker Carlson really has gone heavy on this, talking about how corporate media, legacy media is just covering all this up. No one's asking any questions. Like, the paper showed that it's actually the U.S. that's fighting the war with Russia, not through a proxy through Ukraine, but directly. Now, we already know this. I've already been talking about this. We saw the Russians shot down an American plane. It was a drone, but it was still a plane. What were they doing over there? We know that the U.S. has given all this cutting-edge technology, heavy artillery to the Ukrainians that take teams of trained people to run them. They're requesting jets and tanks. They can't fly those on their own. Of course we know the U.S. is in on this. But nobody's asking that. Nobody's asking about how the Pentagon, no one's asking about how the administration got this information on the hacker. No one asked about how they used illegal surveillance techniques to identify this kid, and apparently had help from the Washington Post and the New York Times. How did the Washington Post and New York Times get access to this information? They have security clearances? Nobody's asking those questions. But like I said, it's what was in it was bad, which of course is why they're not talking about it. The U.S. is spying on its allies. And it just goes to show what happens to whistleblowers. I remember Obama, he ran on a campaign saying that he wanted to promote and protect whistleblowers. Because, of course, why wouldn't you? If you want transparency, if you want truth and trustfulness, then you trust and truthfulness, then you need to allow whistleblowers. That's what the press is supposed to be for. That's why the press is protected, so they can do this. But yet here we have this National Guardsman supposedly leaked, and now he's all over the news, and he's probably going to be thrown away in a cell with the keys thrown away for all of eternity. But yet we have Lieutenant Colonel Vindman admitted to leaking documents meant to help Democrats impeach Trump, and he never served any time. It's easy to see the government from how they prosecute crimes against the citizens against each other, prosecute crimes against the government itself, and now even more specifically over which side of the government. So if you commit a crime against somebody else, like in New York, for example, or Chicago, no big deal. You don't even go to jail. You commit crime against the government, Well, it depends on which side it is. If it's to help get Trump out of office, no big deal. If it's about showing the Biden administration failure, you're probably going to prison for the rest of your life. Anyway, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Mark Moss Show. It's technology is changing the world, and they're trying to stop it. They don't want you to communicate anymore, so you don't continue to expose them. But we're going to continue to expose them on this show. Hopefully, you've enjoyed this conversation. Hit me up on social media at @1MarkMoss. Let me know you're listening, and that's what I got. Thanks so much for listening.